Welcome back, everybody, to Joshua's Magic, a channel about how the ordinary world and spiritual realities intersect. Today, we're going to be discussing some quotes from the Alice A. Bailey works on the law of correspondence, which has to do with the idea of as above, so also below. And getting into the first quote here. Microcosmic and macrocosmic correspondence. The relationship between the microcosm and the macrocosm is accurate and exists not only broadly, but likewise in detail. This is a fact to be grasped and worked out. As knowledge increases and progress is made, and as the ability to meditate results in the faculty of transmitting from the higher triad to the personality via the causal, then these facts will be ever more clearly demonstrated in detail, and perfect comprehension will ensue. So what he's talking about here is there's a sort of triplicity in man. There's the personality, the mind, emotions, the body. Then there's the causal, which is another way of referring to the soul body. And then above that, there's sort of aspects related to your pure spirit. Soul is an interplay between matter and spirit in one understanding of it. And so he's talking about this higher triad, which is the higher mind, the Buddhic vehicle, and the Atmic vehicle. Yeah, perfect comprehension will ensue. As above, so also below is a truism glibly repeated, but little realized. What is found above and what will consequently be developing below. Above will be found will, love, activity, or power, wisdom, and intelligence. The terms we apply to the three aspects of divine manifestation. Below will be found these three in the process of appearing. A, the personality expressing intelligence, the ego, or the soul, expressing love or wisdom, the monad expressing will or power. And the monad is the highest point that sits above that spiritual triad. You have in the three worlds of the personality, the physical, expressing a reflection of the activity aspect, the astral or emotional, expressing a reflection of the love wisdom aspect, and the mental, expressing a reflection of will or power aspect. What you have for the colors of those three bodies, exoterically described. Again, exoterically means outwardly, and esoterically means inwardly. The violet of the physical as expressed by the etheric, the rose or red of the astral, and the orange of the mental. What have you in the triad or the world of the threefold ego? Higher Manas, which is the higher mind, expressing activity or the intelligence aspect, Buddhi, expressing the love or wisdom aspect, and Atma, expressing the will or power aspect. And that's from Letters on Occult Meditation. I've got a bit of a cold here, so forgive me for that. But this is laying out some of the basics of the law of correspondence, at least as it applies to man, that you have these on a higher level, willpower, love, wisdom, and active intelligence manifest a certain way on a higher level, and then you see the lower correspondence of their manifestation on a lower level. And one way this also applies is, if you look at the atom in the solar system, they're very similar. There's this positive nucleus of the sun, and then there's these smaller bodies that orbit around it. And so that's just one clear demonstration of the law of correspondences in exoteric science. By the way, if you're enjoying this video, please leave a like on it and really help me out to get these ideas out to more people. And consider sharing it with somebody who might appreciate it. And if you have any comments or questions, just put them in the live chat or later on, and I'll try to get to those. But moving on to the next quote. Disciples gravitate into world groups, and many of them are doing far more efficient work than those gathered together in esoteric groups. The advanced accepted disciple has always his own group, which he gathers around him for active and creative work. I would remind you of this. The gauge of a disciple's capacity lies in his influence through pen, word of mouth, and personal influence upon others. So he's talking about how disciples who are just trying to do kind of a more mundane seeming work in the world are often more efficient than people in esoteric groups. Somebody I know used to quote the Tibetan saying that he regarded esotericists as the most glamored people on earth. So if you're on the spiritual or esoteric path, it's important to kind of keep that in mind and to not get, disconnected from ordinary reality and, being decent and a good person and so forth. You get lost in all sorts of complicated abstractions. But he continues, under the law of correspondence, there is ever a numerical relation with established numerical entities. The 6 sages of discipleship are naturally related to the 6 schools of Indian philosophy, which were in reality the 6 seed schools for all philosophical surmise and work. There are not 6 types of ashrams corresponding to the 6 stages of discipleship because there are 7 ashrams, one for each rate type. And all 6 stages of discipleship are related to all the ashrams and all the 7 rate types, expressing at some stage their unfoldment on the path of discipleship. These 6 steps towards the center. So this is another development of seeing the law of correspondence play out numerically. Like you'll see 6 play out here, here, and here, and you'll see 7 play out here, here, and here. 3 in particular plays out this kind of trinity. So you'll have the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit in Christianity, and then in Hinduism you have let me think. It's Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And so the triplicity and the numbers play out in different fashions, in different ways. But from the limited perspective we have on this planet at this time with most of humanity, it's hard to see the correspondence between the higher and the lower. But if you recognize that there is some kind of correspondence, it unlocks this key to kind of perceiving things more truly and accurately. So moving on to the next quote. This one's interesting. I stated as our third point that every initiation indicated a closer sharing in all forms of the hierarchical life. Do you realize in any measure what that statement means or what the implications are? I'm dealing with a point not only of profound significance, but of major testing. There is a spiritual counterpart or higher correspondence of the economic life of our planet to be found within the hierarchy. And again, he's talking about the spiritual hierarchy, the hierarchy of souls, what corresponds to sort of the soul aspect of our planet, where humanity corresponds to the personality aspect of our planet. And then the spirit or the father aspects corresponds to Shambhala and the lives that exist there. Sharing is associated with that which is of value and should be shared if justice is to be demonstrated, and basically with those values which are life-giving. The sharing to which I'm referring is the sharing of all reactions, of all attitudes, of all types of wisdom, of all problems and difficulties and limitations, so that they become constructive in the group sense and cease to be destructive. Nothing destructive has place in any ashram, but disciples can and do use ashramic force in their work in a destructive manner, and in the 3 worlds. This is not easy to understand. Perhaps I can make it clear to you if I point out that this sharing involves complete knowledge of all the personality reactions of all the members of the ashram, i.e., of all those preparing for lesser initiations, and therefore below a certain degree. There is nothing secret which will not be known, and you can understand that discovery of the factual nature of this constitutes a major test for all disciples. There is nothing in the mind of a disciple which cannot be telepathically known to all other members of the ashram, or at the same degree of development, or to all of a higher degree. For this is the law that the greater can always include the lesser. So to talk on ashrams for a second, this isn't the kind of ashram like you see in India or with, yoga stuff where there's like this teacher and this group of students around him. That's sort of a symbol for what this is. The ashrams referred to here exist on a deeper plane of existence. I think I remember reading that the ashrams exist at a minimum on the Buddhic level existence. But a number of people will be disciples in an ashram of one of the masters of wisdom, but won't really have much conscious knowledge of it in their personality. On a deeper level, their soul or their inner self will be aware of this and functioning actively, but how much of that actually comes through the waking consciousness can vary. But on that deeper level, on the level of the soul or even deeper than that, there's this sharing of all sorts of reactions and knowledge, and there's an understanding of the personality of all the people involved, even if that knowledge doesn't filter down to their personalities. So, outwardly, we have the economic situations of the world where people produce this and sell this over here, and it's all interconnected and interrelated, especially today with how interconnected the world is globally. But a deeper correspondence is the spiritual hierarchy, the soul of the planet. Well, what's being shared there isn't money or physical goods, but these inner virtues, qualities, reactions. They're all telepathically interconnected. And by the way, you can find these all on Instagram and Minds if you'd like to follow along during the week. The links are in the description there. And speaking of Minds, we'll go over to Minds for the next one is Instagram limits characters, and this one's a little longer. An ashram is a subjective fusion of individuals and not of personalities, gathered together for service purposes. It is a blending of the individual activity into one whole, a whole which is united on objective and vision, but which may and frequently does have different methods and techniques. The work of the ashram is essentially the presentation to the world of those service purposes which are carried forward as seem best to the individual disciple under the impression of the master and with the cooperation of his group. A group of disciples is not pledged to do the same type of work in the same way at the same time. They are pledged to work under the inspiration of their soul, as their souls may direct and dictate, strengthened by contact with the master and with each other. They are related to each through the identity of vision and vibration, plus mutual respect, complete freedom, particularly the latter. So that's very interesting, is particularly that they have complete freedom. So when you're a part of one of these ashrams, as people will become when they reach a certain level of development invariably, it's not like an outer group where the teacher says something and everybody just needs to go forward with it. But the thing that unites them together is that they're following the soul and that they have some degree of a shared vision. And people will work that out in service to humanity in different ways and at different times. And it might wildly vary. And they might even go astray, as in the last quote, it was talking about the destructive forces that can come through if not handled properly. But this is the real diversity, not the kind of bastardized stuff sometimes people push today. It's like diversity of the deeper things, but there's also a unity. There's the unity through the soul, but the diversity in perspectives and approaches and even time and place. But you have to have these two opposites counterbalance, the unity and the diversity, the outer and the inner. As you ponder on this, I would ask you to realize that an ashram is not a group of people working under the tutelage of some master. This is an important point to remember. It is, as I said earlier, a magnetic point of tension, a fusion of energies directed towards a common center and involving two magnetic factors. One, a united urge towards group formation upon the mental plane. This is the higher correspondence of the herd instinct of the animal world and of the world of men, but is of spiritual nature and quite differently motivated. The lower herd instinct is motivated largely by the instinct of self-preservation, the higher by the recognition of the immortal nature of the soul and by the instinct to serve even with the sacrifice of oneself. The law of death unto life controls. When the magnetic pull of the group is adequately strong, then comes the death of the personality life. Until, therefore, the group of disciples in all its parts expresses this outgoing sacrificial urge, it is not an ashram. So here's another instance of the law of correspondence. You see on the lower level, the sort of herd mentality in animals, and maybe you could even say groupthink in humans. But on a higher level, going with the group is based not on blindness or just following authority or following, instincts or emotions, but on this recognition of the soul and recognition of group purpose and the need to serve others above oneself. Two, the magnetic pull of the positive center at the very heart of the group. That means the magnetic pull of the master. As you well know, theoretically at least, at the center of the ashram stands ever the master, or else an initiate or a world disciple. His task is to blend and fuse the energies, tendered and proffered by the group under the urge to serve, and to indicate the field of service. The mode of this instinctual activity is called occult obedience, and this is voluntarily rendered and unitedly followed. When any group working in this way under a master is moved by one spiritual impulse and functioning through one firm organization, like electrons around the positive nucleus of an atom, the potency of the group will become immediately effective and not before. So occult obedience is not well understood. It's kind of a weird term. But it's obedience first and foremost to the soul, not to your personality urges or to some other person or ideology out there. And additionally, he's talking about the ashram actually functions much like the solar system and the atom. There's this positive nucleus at the center, and then there's these other beings or points which kind of orbit around it, so to speak. So even there, you see the correspondence play out. It's very obvious to see in an outward thing like the solar system and the atom, but it takes more vision to see it in this situation. Firm order. Okay. And we will move on to the next quote. Adrian Brady commented in the live chat. What are the practical day-to-day implications of following these laws? Do you mean the law of correspondence or something else, Adrian? Let me continue with the next one, and I'll respond to your follow-up comment there. So we'll finish up this last one, and then I'll get into the comments here. So it's the last one. Earlier, I told you that 3 words should be considered in relation to the points of revelation: procedure, location, and objective. All 3 of them are here in considering the nature of the impending revelation. So actually, to bring up sort of a side note, this guy, Cliff Roboto, who I did an interview about esoteric astrology with, I was in this class he was having, and we were dealing with a similar portion of discipleship in the New Age here. And he made some interesting points about these triplicity of words the Tibetan uses, uh, procedure, location, objective. And he shared an interesting anecdote that in considering these words over and over for years, it actually led to him having a kind of intuitive flashing forth of something. He didn't really get into what it was exactly, but it was an example of how considering these things again and again actually leads to you coming to understand them in a deeper way. And so that's maybe partially to address what Adrian had to say. The recognition of these points of revelation fall automatically into two main procedures or planned processes. The procedure carried forward under the impulse of the law of sacrifice, which destroys all hindrances, breaks down all impediments, and removes all individual obstacles, thus releasing the initiate into that vortex of force in which he learns the method of handling planetary correspondence of that which he has individually overcome. These words should be carefully studied in relation to the second, the third, and the fourth initiations. So when you've handled all your kind of emotional issues, largely speaking, and your mental imbalances and misperceptions, and you've, got your physical body and etheric body in roughly working order. At a certain point, there's a higher correspondence of all those things on a planetary level. And you begin to work with those energies and forces when you've reached that stage of discipleship or initiation. But again, the law of correspondences plays out. The things that are reflected in you are a reflection of higher, deeper things. The procedure carried forward at the remaining 5 initiations in this initiatory process, there is a spiritual absorption of the infinite into the circle and into the cycle of universal mind. The initiate is then caught up and liberated into planetary fields of endeavor, wherein the will must be employed as the monad may direct. You can see from the above how abstruse all this advanced teaching must necessarily remain, veiled and protected in order to protect and guard the initiate. This dual procedure in relation to the crucial moment in each of the initiations is always most scrupulously guarded. The moment wherein the initiate, standing upon the point within the triangle, not within the square. And again, the triangle sort of symbolizes the soul or possibly the spiritual triad, where the square represents the lower quaternary of the personality. So he's not standing in the personality of his own perceptions and wants and desires. He's standing in the higher self now. He sees in a flash of time the great aligning procedure which will carry him from the immediate point of revelation on to the final glory, must and will be forever protected. So these things can't be revealed to people who aren't ready, basically. So they can be sort of veiled and put in certain ways, which gets back to why considering them can have value, because it's slowly building a bridge to these eventualities. But the exact specific reality of what's revealed at higher initiations can't be given out to people. And you see that reflected in Freemasonry and some of these other similar things where you're not allowed to reveal the secrets imparted. Now, those aren't necessarily the higher secrets being referred to here, but it is an analogy to that sort of deeper stuff. So let's see if Adrian followed up on that. No, but well, I'll go by what I think he's saying here. What are the practical day-to-day implications of following these laws? The law of correspondence, you can see it play out in a number of different ways. And so one practical way is kind of using it psychologically. So when you're doing things out in the world, that's a reflection of what's going on with you mentally or emotionally. One example I gave to somebody recently is I used to be into reading about conspiracies a bunch. And I realize, and I'm not saying there aren't actual conspiracies out there, um, but I was too into it. And part of the reason I was too into it was because there was a sort of, it resonated with me because internally there was a conspiracy within me of negative forces within me that had, had too much dominance over myself. And so when you read about these negative people out there that are conspiring to sort of, take over the world or keep people docile or pacified or whatever, um, it can be true, but it can also be a reflection of your own internal psychological state. And so I think that's one of the major ways that the law correspondences is most useful to people. It's like see what your reactions are, see how you're behaving in the world, and what is that reflecting within you. That's, I think, of the most primary value. Oh, Adrian follows up. How can the law of correspondence be bridged from theory to everyday practice? Does it just provide understanding or a way to carry on the daily life practically enhanced? Uh, in addition to what I was just saying there, anything that develops your understanding allows you to operate more effectively, even in things that don't seem to have any relevance to what you're going through right now. Like learning and broadening your horizons will eventually come full circle and be useful in your life. It might not be today, but you see people thinking about things that are sort of seemingly impractical. Like you could talk about scientific theories or discoveries in the past that didn't bear immediate fruit, but thinking about these concepts led to actual principles of science being discovered, which then were able to be applied to various things that we see and do in our lives, like the development of different technologies and stuff. But another example is thinking about these things. Eric Weinstein made this great analogy about thought islands. And it's like it's hard to grasp new concepts if you can't connect them to concepts you already understand. And so you have these kind of thought islands. And if you don't know anything about astrophysics and somebody's trying to tell you some astrophysical stuff, even if they're explaining it pretty well and making it very simply, if you don't have anything to really connect it to that's already lodged in your consciousness, it's hard for it to stick there. And so part of considering the law of correspondence and other esoteric and philosophical concepts is you're building up a thought island in different chunks. And so other things can be connected to it later. And then once these things are actually connected, there might be this aha moment that really leads to a revelation in your life or a changing in your relationships with people, or if you're even scientifically inclined, some new discovery or theory which might be useful to humanity at large. I hope that explaining some of the practical uses of these laws. I mean, that's kind of the difficulty with spirituality, esotericism, occultism, that you're considering things which don't seemingly have an immediate practical value, but it really needs to have this kind of long-term thinking for the results to eventually pay off. It's like that phrase, um, a thought reaps an action reaps a habit reaps a character reaps a destiny. Um, I don't know if there was something after destiny, but the point is, this one thing starts another cycle, which builds up another cycle, which builds up something else, and eventually leads to significant results. But it starts with something small or minor, but carried forward over time leads to these big practical changes you see in the world. And any significantly positive thing that's been done has started with usually one person just having an idea and carrying it forward. Or maybe having an idea and then ultimately failing, but then it inspires other people, and then generations later it leads to something. So there's gotta be this kind of faith in the power of thought and in the power of meditation that the things that aren't practically valuable now, if they are true and good, will eventually lead to practical value in the future. So unless there's any other comments, I'll be wrapping up that stream. I'd love to hear more feedback from people, what they're getting out of this, if they'd like to see anything different or whatever. But please let me know in the comments. And till next time, this is Joshua's Magic. Please like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for being here.